Fantastic. I'm so happy to have another look back episode with Jim Hamilton. Jim is one of those folks who came out of the Santa's workshop. I mean Tandy workshop. Tandy, as most of you know, the main from its main offspring, which was Radio Shack, which Charles Tandy and Team bought in 1962 for $300,000 and was then known as the trendy Radio Shack and Leather Company. And it blossomed into 8,000 stores. I know, 8,000 stores. And many of you know, Tandy started off in Radio Shack. Man, Jim, we're going to talk about that for a little bit, but the idea of 8,000 stores focusing on those early tinkerers and do-it-yourself people and gadgets, and hey, I need something. And it was like crossing the chasm as we go from retail into tech items moving into retail. And you got into the next wave of that with the popularizing of the computer superstore. You worked, of course, at Computer City. You worked at Montgomery Ward, right?
Award,
Circuit
right? Yeah.
City.
So,
Uh,
yeah.
and then Tandy also had a response. I mean, Computer City was a response in a way to what Fry's was doing and Micro Center and CompUSA. And then you decided to supersize on top of that with Incredible Universe. All of those stories just became the favorites of mine during the Computer Retail Week era and that whole generation of tech and retailing. Jim, welcome to the Look Back. Sorry for the long introduction there.
No, Computer Retail Week back in those days was how we kept up with everything, right? New products that we had missed, or new articles or competition. As a matter of fact, I tell my students all the time at the University of Dallas that you got to read the trade journals. If you want information, you're going to start a new company, you got to figure the trade journals out and read the stories that are taking place, because many times competitors will talk to you journalists, but they won't share any other information. So we loved Computer Retail Week.
You love to hate it
We
sometimes
love to
too.
hate it, right? We
As
loved it
I
on the days you
recall.
wrote nice things about us.
Well, you guys were generating so many great stories. It was so fantastic. When you look back, as my podcast likes to focus, what are some of those memories that you harken back to? I know you're teaching now and doing a whole bunch of other things, which we will get into, but when you think of some of those favorite stories and learnings.
Yeah, there's so many things at Computer City. I mean, we were in many cases just flying by the seat of our pants many times, because none of this stuff had ever been done before. So to go international was phenomenal. To put stores in Canada and was absolutely phenomenal. The problem is, we our systems weren't always keeping up with as fast as we were moving. So trying to get everything ready to open stores in Canada, Alan Bush, my boss, the president, was actually up there phoning back to me what inventory was actually sitting in the store so I could build an ad for that, a couple of days later. We did newspaper advertising, and you could do them pretty quickly. You just didn't want to run something that you didn't have inventory of, or you could look at competition and see where you need to price the goods to be very competitive. So those days were phenomenal. And then of course the people that gets behind you to do those type of things, it was great. We also, I don't know if you remember, but we ended up being the second fastest retailer to hit $1 billion in sales.
Wow.
And then we ended up being the second fastest retailer to hit $2 billion in sales. And of course, Sam's Club was the fastest.
Wow.
So yeah, it was amazing. And we
I
get
think
this 2.5.
it was an amazing time, and I think we kind of look past those things because it sort of, in hindsight, it looks like it was over in a blink of an eye, but that was a good generation of activity.
Absolutely. Well, think about the technology. I remember going on a buying trip to the Far East, and when we left, the hard drives, remember, were at like 4 speed. Then they went to 8 speed. They were at 16 speed before we were seeing 16 speed hard drives by the time we ended up our 3-week trip. So, I mean, it was just crazy times.
There was an interesting thing trying to balance technology innovation with what's ready for consumers to adopt
Yeah.
versus you got to deliver the product and it's got to work. And there were some rough periods, but in terms of lessons and experiences, what were some of your fun memories from that time?
It was clearly people. I mean, from a lesson standpoint, it's kind of a cliche to say get the right people in the right seats. But boy, oh boy, we could have never done that if we didn't have, the group that we had. Uh, we had Kurt Nelson and Richard Lapp on the supply chain side for us. They followed me down from Montgomery Ward. They're both deceased now, may they rest in peace. But, to keep the inventory in the right places at the right time, it was phenomenal, the job that they did. And then, of course, we had the marketing team that every week we were building advertising based on. I'll tell you a funny story. Can I tell you a funny story about
Absolutely,
computers?
that's what it's all about.
So I'll tell you, back we were. Remember when we had pagers? That was our lifeline, was
Yeah.
pagers, right? So CompUSA is beating us.
Jim, by the way, I go back to the Model TRS 80 if we want to just start to date myself. But thank you. And I don't get to use the word acoustic couplers enough in my current language. So please proceed.
Well, I appreciate that. I know you and I are on the same. You can listen to a modem connecting and tell the speed, right? By the sound. So anyway, I've got this pager, and my office is on the top floor of Tandy Tower 2, and it's got these 20-foot glass windows, and we would do these our planning for advertising on my whiteboard in my office, and then the marketing team would take it down and they would work on it and put it into print and so forth. And we were getting killed every week. CompUSA seemed to have our advertising and was beating us in the ad. We could not figure, we still don't know today how they were doing it. So all of a sudden, I'm sitting at my desk and I hear a beep. And I'm thinking, wow, where's that coming from? Is that a battery, some sort of battery powered item that's going dead here? And so I look at I'm looking around at my desk, I'm looking all over the place, and I can't find anything. So I call, Tandy Security, they come over. They put people in the ceilings.
Oh boy.
They're looking for this beep. So finally, he comes, the guy that's running this whole escapade comes to me and says, we think we found it. We're going to cut a section of the wall out right here behind your desk, and we think there's something in the wall. So, I said, okay. So I start moving my chair out of the way and clearing stuff out. And he says, by the way, you don't have a pager, do you, in your desk? And I said, oh, no, I've already looked through there. I said, my pager's in my briefcase, and it's laying up against the wall. About the time I said that, it beeps. The pager was in with a low battery sitting in my briefcase. And all these people are going crazy looking for the beep.
And you're thinking that Nathan Morton had somebody stick it in there.
It was espionage.
I like that. Well, you made a comment, and I want to respond to it about the people. And I'll give a shout out to one of our mutual friends and a Tandy veteran, Dave Martella.
Dave Martella, what a super guy.
Well, I know him as a family friend and a business contact, and he recently passed. In fact, it was just a year. I saw it on Facebook. But one of my favorite people, my heart goes out to he and his family. I know you feel the same. But he was just a wonderful merchant and just a great person. So we'll dedicate this episode to him and some of the other great soldiers you worked with. It was a great group of people I got to know through your whole organization.
Yeah, it was like I said, a great team of people, that just came to work every day to get the job done. And
so now where is Alan Bush these days?
He's in Florida. He's in Palm Beach, and I'm sure he still golfs every single day.
Okay, well, that's scary to think about, but I wish him well. I hope I can bump into him on one of these podcasts soon too. And let's talk about Packard Bell as just an interesting case study. I don't know if you've ever done the case study with your classes, But here's a company that took a brand name that had some awareness and interest, and they completely repackaged it, and it was a whole new product. And a team of Israeli businessmen in the US, in Los Angeles, I believe, built a factory around a distribution company. And then they started manufacturing computers. That was right in that period of time where it was a build your own mentality. And
Yeah.
that thing, talk about growth and owning retail shelves and relationships. What a phenomenal story. And you got to know them quite well.
I did get to know him quite well. As a matter of fact, one of the three founders and I became partners, later in life. And, we created a holding company, a fund that focused on Israeli companies. So, yes, I got to know them very well. As a matter of fact, I have one of the top secret, and I didn't know you were going down the Packard Bell path, but I have one of the top secret Packard Bell prospectuses, the red herring that came out, very short lived. They pulled it pretty quickly. But they were going to go public in those days, and they were the lion's share of the retail computer space. If you didn't have Packard Bell on your shelf, you were losing.
But
And they
was
were
that,
so
was that more so because they built the strategic relationships on the retail side, or because they did such a good job on the consumer demand and hitting price point side? What do you look at that when you try to think of the formula that worked for so long for them?
yeah. So if we look at the market was pretty fragmented when they came into play, right? I mean, we were still dealing with King Kong Bundy. Remember those days? And Harry Fox and over
Um,
at Philips, and so Smith Corona computers and Epson computers. So they really picked a good time to come into the marketplace because Apple wasn't there yet, IBM wasn't there yet, Compaq wasn't there yet. So they just seized upon being aggressive in those days. Now, when their shares started going down, obviously is when Compaq and others came into being. But they really seized on that whole marketplace, and they started out with Tetong in Taiwan, being very aggressive with them on pricing and so forth, and they would cut the margins razor thin.
yeah.
And I talked about these ads that we would carry around, and I would get a copy a few days in advance. I don't remember how many days it was, but it was the same week. And I remember getting on an airplane going to Plains, New York, to visit IBM, and I had my ads that I had to proof to put into publication or to give the approval to go. And I had them in my briefcase, and we get to the IBM meeting, and the pricing, they're presenting their items for the next, 6 months or whatever. And Packard Bell was blowing them away on that weekend's ad. I mean, that's how aggressive they were. You really had to be on top of things to compete with them at the time. And of course, it put Epson and Smith Corona and all those people out of business, Canon out of business. So yeah, they were great. And then they always had the latest and greatest technology. But I'll tell you what kept everybody buying is we always had this period where the old product would kind of become stagnant. So you're trying to run down your inventory so you could get the latest and greatest Packard Bell. Well, what they did, what all of the other people did is they would kind of give you a little markdown money to try to get rid of it ahead of time. Packard Bell would take it back. So you always had fresh Packard Bell on the shelves. You never had to worry about. Now, how they supported that, I still don't know to this day.
Probably
But
some manufacturing or remanufacturing, right? Or
could
close
very
down
well be.
panel.
Could
Right,
very
fantastic. Well, we have so many fun stories looking back, but you've also done a lot of innovative things, moving forward and keeping yourself busy today. Now we're in a whole nother era, right? With AI technology and virtual reality and all kinds of other things. How are you seeing the market? How are you looking at businesses and opportunities, and what are the kind of lessons that still apply today?
Yeah, so it's always been, people that are very sharp. I was in Dan Quee spoke to my class yesterday, and I don't know if you know Dan. Dan is a guy that created a lot of the virtual reality glasses and so forth. Google ended up buying the patents from his company and so forth. So he's a very sharp guy. And that's what, as we did in those days, you take a bunch of technologies, you duct tape them all together and you come up with a new product, right? So it was always, can we get a smaller keyboard, that we could carry around? Can we get more battery life? Can we get a smaller screen? And, and that's kind of what they've done today, is they've taken phones, for example, that are computers, and they've done all that and shoved it together. AI is going to change the way we do business. I mean, it is, there's so many different things right now. I'm looking at a company in Greece right now, getting involved with a company in Greece that has some things where they can analyze your marketing plans. They can analyze commercials and all that.
Oh,
And
wow.
it will spit out in just a few minutes. And it's amazing.
So kind of like a demand predictor of sorts.
Yeah, I mean it does all the things we would do in marketing, which are hotspots, visual hotspots, and all that. And then it will actually dig into who's the persona of the customers it believes you're targeting, and if you're missing the mark to that group, and if anything is sensitive that you're doing, it is truly amazing. I mean, I don't get blown away very often, but it's truly amazing.
On top of that, you look at what's happening out in the retail landscape with folks like, let's just say, Best Buy's a survivor. But I also think about concepts like their Geek Squad. Is that one of the keys to their survivability, if you will? The idea that there's a whole generation of people out there that still are looking for the manual, or they're still trying to figure out how to connect this to that and have a problem understanding Wi-Fi and routers and, just setting up multiple displays or any of these common tech issues. What is it about what they were doing, what Radio Shack was doing, what you're seeing out in the market today that maybe creates a new opportunity?
Yeah, but now, of course, Montgomery Ward, Sears, and Radio Shack had home servicing forever, right? And so they understood the customer's need to bring somebody in the home and help them solve their problems. Today, Best Buy is probably the last guy in the marketplace doing anything like that. Even if people buy from Amazon, they get it home, and and they really don't know how to connect it. The same thing, smart TVs today. I mean, you get those things, and then you want to add, the different apps to it, so you can watch your favorite shows on NBC or CBS, or free shows, Freevee, or all of those different things. And most people can't figure it out. Most people struggle with that. So you're right. I think Best Buy has done a good job of being able to educate the world. The other thing that's happening, of course, are the influencers that are out there. I wanted to do something on my car, my Tahoe, and I ended up going on YouTube and figuring out it's got a video on, how to, I think it was replacing a mirror got broken off or something. And I was going to replace the mirror myself. I'm kind of a handy guy. And go onto YouTube and boom, not a problem.
Right.
And it tells you what you should watch for. Don't go down this, rabbit hole.
Right. And I'm sure AI is going to have a role in all of that too. So there's
Absolutely. How about the virtual glasses, though, that the tech guys wear, that the augmented reality, where they sit behind your TV set or your washing machine or your refrigerator, and it points to the parts and tells them what the parts are and how to check a certain part. I mean, that sort of stuff just blows me away.
Yeah.
Still blows me away. All the technology you and I have been involved with, and that stuff still blows me away.
It's funny when you look back at the generation of the superstore, we were always going to the store to see what was the latest and greatest. It seems so trivial today, the idea of some of those products, but they were formidable at that time in terms of taking leaps forward in terms of the technology and the productivity you would get out of those products.
Yeah. It's I'm sure you're like me. We grew up with Radio Shack, right? We would go to Radio Shack to get all those gadgets. Couldn't wait to get the Radio Shack catalog. You look for the Christmas books from Montgomery Ward and Sears when you were younger, but as you got older, it became the Radio Shack catalog.
I knew where a couple of them were in my area, and I would visit them frequently. that fuse and that transistor and that chip and that all kinds of other fun stuff.
And the people could tell you what to do with it. I mean, you could walk in, give them your problem. You've got questions, we've got answers was a great tagline for Radio Shack for many years. And how true that was. You could go in there and they could tell you what you would need, how to do it, how to solder it, what soldering to buy. It was, I'm not sure we'll ever have anything like that again. It's too expensive.
No, it's hard to, it is hard to imagine, but what a time, right? I mean, we're talking really about the technology entering mainstream consumerism.
Yeah, I mean, so think back, we talked about Packard Bell, but then suddenly Apple came into the marketplace and, they didn't know how to do retail. Compaq came in, they didn't know how to do retail. So, we ended up helping them, some of the major retailers at the time. I was at Montgomery Ward and Circuit City at the time, launching both of those programs, the computer department, SOHO, we called it, small office, home office.
Right.
And launching Apple at both of those places and launching Compaq and so forth. They didn't know packaging, they didn't know owner's manuals. What they knew how to do is sell their product into bars, right? Value added resellers, mom and pop type operations. So it was a big transition for them to move. Same thing with Western Digital and Seagate and all the peripheral companies that wanted to do business but didn't know how to price it, didn't know about returns. They really, I remember Walt Bruckert, who, was a saint of a guy. I don't know if you've got to spend any time. He ran merchandising at Circuit City. And, we used to say he talked to vendors with a velvet hammer. He could beat you up in a meeting and you'd never know it. And then when you walked out of there, you'd say, where did I get all these bruises?
Jim, Circuit City was another one of those several companies that were forbidden from ever talking to us. Of course, I did talk to him once in a while, but those were great times. Okay, so Jim, you're still living in Texas, right? You're
Still in Texas. Yep, still in Fort Worth.
You're in Fort Worth, and you're teaching.
I do. For the last 8 years, I've taught entrepreneurship at the University of Dallas.
Right. How's that?
It is great. I mean, so we start out with all the principles of entrepreneurship, and then we end up with a Shark Tank type contest. You should ask your buddy Mark Cuban to come over and judge one of these days.
Oh, yeah, he would probably love to.
I know you guys are tight.
You got to get on his calendar, but he would probably love to. His whole thing, and he goes through this multiple times about it's not about being on TV. It was about promoting entrepreneurship to the world. And that's why he did it. And it just turned into one of the hottest shows on TV because of the pent-up demand.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what my students go through, because we have a contest at the end of the semester. We have some great people make donations to pay for the contest, and they get the real life experience of standing up there doing a presentation to investors. So, the hands-on today is the way to teach. They don't necessarily want to learn from a book or PowerPoint slides. They want to do. So that's what my class is all about. They create pitch decks, they create pitch videos, and of course, they actually have to do a boardroom presentation. So it's pretty cool. I love it. They come up with some great ideas, and then of course the students keep you young because they ask you the questions that you don't want to ask.
No, I do quite a bit of advisory work with startups and some judging. In fact, I did one this week. It is really fun, and it just does blow your mind, all the different ideas out there. At the same time, while it's exciting and enthralling to watch all the new generation building businesses, it's just that wall to cross over from Wall Street to Main Street, or just to make it across the proverbial chasm into something that's got that real growth potential. It's harder and harder. There's so many companies doing similar things that you really need to have the magic. So how do you counsel these entrepreneurs on that type of challenge?
You've got to be different. Just like back in the day, I remember, we would get in some phenomenal software at, in Montgomery Ward, Circuit City and Computer City, and we would put them in laundry, the laundry baskets type thing, the big hotel type baskets, cloth linen baskets, and they would just mound up. And you got to. And we used to tell everybody, how do you know, or ask the buyers, how do you know that you're not missing the greatest software ever? Because they just can't break through it. And that continues to today. It's still, there's so many opportunities happening now that that wall is torn down between the US and China manufacturing. And you've got companies that you can just go online now and order things out of the Far East, and it continues to be a challenge. But you've got to figure out a way to cut through. You've got to figure out a way to get an edge. And I think the people that can figure that out are going to be very successful. The people that can't, don't have the passion, don't have the heart to figure out a way to break through is, they're going to miss big time.
I think they're getting a lot of great information from somebody like yourself, Jim. That's had an amazing journey. I mean, we've only covered about half of your phenomenal experiences, but I'm running up against my time here with you. But it's a great pleasure to catch up. Is there one last look back you can share with the folks here about either the good old days or some things you're doing currently?
Well, like I said, the technology just keeps changing. So I've loved being part of, the AI, jumping from technology to technology, ran a little piece in there of a small company you probably never heard of, global retail and distribution for Motorola Mobility. And, at that company,
They sold to Google, right?
we sold, yeah, that's when I
They
left.
got the patent lot.
We
Yeah.
sold it to Google. And being part of that and seeing the thought process of the people at Google on what products come next, I think that's been probably one of the most thrilling things, is being able for people to want to talk to you, want to show you their technology and what comes next. That's why Jason and I got so involved in the Israeli companies. Now he wasn't Israeli, but we were able to get these. They all wanted him to do with them what he did for Packard Bell. And we just had some amazing technologies coming out of there. So
Yeah. And they still are.
and they still are, right? They still are.
Wow. Well, what a great pleasure. I'm going to wrap up now, but I really can't thank you enough. I mean, the work you're doing in Texas, a great journey, and thanks for sharing it. I don't know if I can make it out to one of these Shark Tank things at your class, but if I can ever help in any other way, let me know.
Absolutely. Great catching up, Keith. We need to do this more frequently, and we might even have beer involved, you never
Oh,
know.
wait a second. All of a sudden, I do have Texas on my agenda. Hey, all the best to you, and let's do that. Let's catch up again soon. Thanks for joining the Look Back.
Sounds good. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.